Hello, and good evening.
Welcome to the LEC Update, the show you never thought you needed, and once you've seen it, you'll know for sure.
I'm Evie de Portere.
And I'm Christy Frierson.
Now, tonight marks the end of the first half of the regular season, and some of our teams are responding with drastic measures.
Fnatic lost their first game last week and already seem keen to lose the entire split. After just one loss, Rekkles is already riding the bench. Although he did play a game of bot lane Karma recently, so maybe this is just some leftover trauma from last summer. Either that or Broxa has been practicing his Lee Sin IRL. To bring us more, Lenny Radkaus is standing by in sunny Sweden.
Hello there.
Hello.
Mr. Frierson. So I got a chance to speak to Rekkles. I can confirm, after a long, detailed conversation, I learned he is, in fact, in Sweden, yes.
Yeah, but we already knew that. What did he actually tell you?
Oh, don't worry. He assured me, as well as all the Fnatic fans out there, that he has been practicing very hard on the most recently added champion to the game, League of Legends, known as Sangria.
Sangria? Did you mean Kiana? Like the new champion Kiana?
No, I am 100% sure that he pronounced it Sangria.
Well, okay then. Thanks, Lenny. In other Fnatic news, Nemesis will be playing bot lane this week, continuing the trend of second-rate mid laners swapping to the easier role. Felix is stepping in as Fnatic's new mid laner. You might recognize him as the guy she told you not to worry about.
And after a disappointing start to the split, Papa Smithy thinks things are looking up for Misfits, saying there is so much talent on Misfits. I really am looking forward to Soaz, Maxlore, Febiven, Hansama, and Gorilla turning it on this weekend. I predict an undefeated weekend for the squad. And you know what? I think he might be right. Now, as far as super teams go, Misfits is on track with some of the best in League's history, like KT, Kingzone, and Alliance. Put together the most stacked team ever, but still fail miserably. That's child play. You gotta bench your entire roster for your second squad. Then you take the cake. Now, this may come as welcome news for Misfits fans, though. As Misfits Premier, they already won EU Masters. That means they already have more international titles than Doublelift.
Excel finally got their first win last week, which raises the question, will they upgrade from the Student Edition to the Professional Suite?
Well, after a horrible start to the split, Vitality is picking up a few more wins here and there. But Jizuke doesn't see the problem, asking, would you like me to go 0-0-0 and lose the game, or at least try and do something? Well, yes, we absolutely want you to do something, but we would prefer if you tried winning instead of tweeting, Mr. Stallion.
This summer split is the most watched it's been since 2015. That was 4 years ago, but for grabs, it's felt more like 4 decades.
Patch 9.14 dropped on Wednesday. Now, today's games will still be played on 9.13, but if you haven't been a fan of the flex pick bruiser meta over the last year or so, then don't you worry. The Riot Balance team has got you covered. But in unrelated but totally related news, Splice will win Worlds this year.
Aatrox lost his revive this patch, and many people are saying he lost his entire identity. But if Misfits can lose their entire roster and still be called Misfits, then we can still call Aatrox Aatrox. Now, as of patch 9.14, you are now able to permanently mute your allies. I'm sure G2 will be sad to learn that they still can't mute their comms in pro games.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Ouch. For LEC Update, I'm Evie de Portere.
And I'm Christy Frierson. Did he say sangria?
Yeah, I could use one right about now. Germany, everyone, and the LEC Summer Split. Week 5 is upon us, and with this comes some shocking changes. After a catastrophic start, Misfits Gaming are swapping out their entire roster for some fresh blood. We'll see what the new players can do versus Splice. We see some of them there. Hello, everyone. I'm Sjokz, joined by Ender and by Frosk. Man, I'm gone for a couple of weeks, and things go crazy in the rosters. What happened?
It just feels like it's kind of in crunch time right now, that people were leading up into Worlds, teams are starting to get a little bit nervous, and you start to need to lock down the wins now. So you look for the roster adjustments to make something work together on the board.
And you say roster adjustments. I see roster overhauls here with Misfits Gaming taking out all 5 of their starters. 5 very veteran players, mind you, and they're putting in their full ERL team. That one EU Masters, mind you, but still their full ERL team to substitute them in.
What do you make of that? Because when you say the race for playoffs is on, certainly replacing your entire roster is not going to get you there as easily.
So my hot take is that I don't actually mind this so much. We saw that Rogue proved that the Ultraliga squad can actually make a splash. When the Mad Lions basically became SK Gaming, they were still making playoffs in their first run. So I don't actually think that there's a huge difference between taking the team that won EU Masters or the ARLs and putting them in over a roster that was already failing.
I mean, you say that, but this team isn't even first in the LFL, the regional league that they're playing in. There's no way in my mind that this team can actually come into the LEC and make playoffs if they can't even win their regional league.
It's a game difference right now in terms of the standings. So, like, I totally understand what you're saying, but the gap isn't that far that they actually need to climb over.
I feel like we need to look at this from a completely different viewpoint with the information that we have, which is SOAS tweeting, you know, see you next year. We know that probably the roster isn't coming back at all. So that then signals to me, okay, Misfits want to wipe the slate completely clean. They're going to start building this ERL roster for 2020.
Yeah, I mean, by putting in all 5 players, you're clearly not trying to win this split or get into playoffs. It's just about getting this team experience, in my mind. If this team was trying to make a push into the postseason, I think you need to take some solid building blocks like Hansama and Gorilla, perhaps, and then try to trade away some of your veteran talent around the board to get that fresh blood. But I don't think subbing out 5 players is the answer for Misfits.
I just think that you already have a squad that have experience together and have proven that they can work together. So it's about trying to eliminate variables. Like, I totally understand what you're saying. You could have salvaged certain parts of the roster, maybe tried to mix it up. But if you can't figure out how to create a new playstyle, just stick with one that works and see if it just works in the LEC.
Yeah, and of course we can't judge before we see it in play. There was another huge change, of course, on the side of Fnatic, which definitely caught me off guard. Fnatic will be starting Nemesis and Hylissang in the bot lane, Magifelix in the mid lane, because Reckless is benched for this game. What do you make of that?
I mean, this is just a huge change, right? Like, I can't sit back here and comfortably say Fnatic are trying to do the same thing they did in 2018, where they put Bwipo into bot lane for Reckless. To me, he's subbed out for 1 game. They don't give very clear reasoning behind it. This seems like a slap on the wrist or something, because there's no reason why you do bring in Magifelix, who has no professional experience on the LEC stage, and then swap one of your best players. Yeah, but you swap out one of your best players in mid lane into the bottom lane, just all of a sudden. Why do that? Why not just do a 1-for-1 swap?
I mean, this happens all the time over in the LPL, where you have a player like Uzi and you take him out because you need to give him a break because he plays so many games. We don't know if this is about, you know, finding a break and just trying to alleviate stress, or if it is disciplinary action. Either way, it's against Rogue of all teams. And while Rogue is rising, I don't see this as like a hit the red alert button for Fnatic fans at all to freak out over this. Because the question is, do they even need Reckless to beat Rogue?
Well, hopefully for Reckless they do, I would say. In any case, Fnatic has said that he's coming back tomorrow. He will be playing on Saturday versus SK, so that makes it all the more curious, but hopefully we'll get to talk to him.
It shows you how much more seriously they take SK Gaming. That team keeps beating them like, no, we can't. We must 2-0 them this split.
Reckless. Yeah, of course, we don't have all the information. I hope we get to talk to them and find out. When it comes to the standings, though, we can see why Fnatic, if they made this choice, they do it now. They're fighting for a top 2 spot, but they don't seem to be in any danger of falling outside of playoffs. However, Misfits Gaming, as said, at 2-6, looking dire for them no matter what. Everything set up for the magical run.
Yeah, I mean, they're down 1 game when you consider they need to hit 6th place in order to make that run. But that still means you need to win games. Not just 1 game, you need to win many games going to the second half of the split. And I do not have much faith in this roster to be able to do that.
I mean, you just have to have more faith over Vitality or SK Gaming or Rogue. Rogue, we have no idea what the ceiling looks like. SK Gaming seem to be combusting. Vitality are so hit and miss. Misfits just actually need to put together something consistent to make playoffs.
Yeah, I think we need to look at this in a completely other perspective as well. Yes, we're looking at what will it do against or for for Fnatic or Misfits. But if you're any of the teams that's also vying for playoff spots with them, you think, this is my chance. We need to be picking up wins here. So I think we'll just see how much influence these changes will have on the rest of the standings as we go forward as well. Now, in terms of possible upsets, they do happen, and we want you to predict them as well as tell us anything you want to about what you think of all the craziness that's going on. Send all your questions or remarks about the LEC Summer Split at LEC on Twitter, and we will be answering them in PGL. Talking about those upsets, last week Saturday got pretty crazy. Frosk, break it down.
Just a little bit. So here we go. Last week, the LEC was rocked with upsets, whether it was jet lag, patch day, or someone missed their breakfast. There is an abundance of excuses to go through for the teams, but let's focus in. First up, it was Excel taking their first LEC victory over SK Gaming. In a fight-heavy game, it was Excel who stacked the tools necessary to keep up with SK Gaming's brawling tempo. They brought equalizers, cataclysms, crystal arrows, and a good tonguing from Mystiques to match SK's aggression tit for tat. Now, not to be undone, Rogue continues to rise to the stability of their inspired Larson combo and a sweet Prophet Smeb cosplay. But the real standout for me was actually HeatQ. Exchanging Woolite for HeatQ left a lot of head scratching, but with Ashe so prominent in the meta, HeatQ was the smart choice and helped punish the multitude of positioning arrows from OG. With the ejection of their Ultra League of Flare, this Rogue has the potential to double their victories from Spring and be a real playoff contender. And finally, it's Splice. Always the bridesmaid, Splice has been going steady with playoffs for a while now, but they're finally ready to commit to the podium and are currently sitting on a 5-game winning streak after their takedown of favorites Fnatic. It was Humanoid's Qiyana that stole the show, because when a teamfight assassin has 7+ kills, people pop, and pop, Fnatic win. With their wins against Origin and Fnatic, it's time to marry Splice to the title of top 3 and recognize that these Vipers are striking now. And while Humanoid showed us his cool Qiyana, the rest of the league has been dominated by the Azir Corki meta, which isn't too favorable.
Yeah, I don't know what actually happened after months of everything spicy. Vayne, Wukong, Zed, Yasuo, we're back to Azir and Corki. How did it happen, and is it going to change?
I mean, we saw a lot of the primary flex picks actually being nerfed and sort of taken out of the meta, or at least not being able to first or second pick them in those rotations, which has given rise to a lot of these, more scaling type marksmen, or Azir in this case in the mid lane, to really take prominence.
Yeah, it feels like it's about fighting over mid lane priority in terms of pushing priority. And there are a few champions that can do that better than Corki and Azir. So you team them up with a hyper-aggressive jungler like the Olaf, and it's just hard to compete with them.
So our flex picks, are they dead? Is it over?
I mean, I don't know if I'd go as far to say that they're entirely dead, but for the most part, we're seeing a lot less of these blind pickable...
Flex picks are never dead as long as Flexius is alive. Just trust me. It doesn't matter how many times they nerf us. As long as Flexius is here, Flex picks are here to stay. Go on, ask where the beach is. I'll show you.
Where's the beach?
The beach is over there.
Are you okay?
The beach is over there.
Less impressive, I have to say, than it was.
I trust... No, not you. No, not you. No. No.
Is that...
No, stop nerfing us.
Was that Jack?
I don't know. I mean, they said he was making a return, apparently just to get Flexius out of here as well. Are we being too gloomy about it? Are there any good things about Azir and Corki for the teams when they're trying to get stability into their playstyle?
Oh, okay, real talk. There are a couple of key champions that I do want to talk about, because as we see the prominence of Azir Corki, eventually teams are going to get creative and they're going to find counter picks. We already saw the talent came out from G2, but there are 3 champions that I'm very excited about, and the first one is Vel'Koz.
Woo!
No one will play him, but they should, because he actually does really well into Azir. He's one of the old school counters in kind of the same vein that Xerath was. It's about outranging the Azir, and with Lux and Ezreal, he actually makes a really cool combo in your line damage. Look at that laser. Now imagine an Ezreal. Now imagine a Lux ultimate. Throw on a Nocturne for good measure. I don't care. I want to see some fun compositions. The only problem is that Vel'Koz is a very specialty champion.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen it, of course, last year a couple of times in the bottom lane when it had the wacky meta. You also think maybe Diana could be a good idea?
Diana was actually played into the Ultra Liga. She's going to be more prominent on 914, I think. At least I've been seeing her a lot in solo queue. But she can actually interrupt Corki's Valkyrie with her pullback. So she has some interesting counterplay. And I think it kind of goes into that same vein of not necessarily playing the lane for the matchup, but playing for kill pressure and playing side lane. So I think Diana is, again, a very niche pick, but could be rather creative in how to answer these 2 champions. And then finally, in the same vein of Diana, it's Shizuke's Echo, or Echo in general. general. It's about trying to find these champions that get underneath the push, that have kill pressure, and then can piece out and play a side lane when it comes to just pushing the minion waves back and forth.
And I mean, when we see that, we know, okay, you don't have to always play Azir and Corki. You can make up these plans where you can counter things. You can still play your own playstyle. But what does it come down to? Do you think it's safer just to pick the Azir and the Corki and just to stay away from these things for some of these teams? Or would you advocate for more versatility from these teams?
I think it's about what you're going to trade. I think it's pretty safe to say that you're probably going to see a lot of Azir blind picks, especially from blue side when a lot of OP picks are taken off the board. But if a team wants to experiment or try to get leverage somewhere else, whether it's the top lane, particularly the jungle or even the bot lane, then you can leave open the Azir and maybe you can have that pocket mid lane pick to counter it out or to have a different playstyle to try to get power elsewhere in your draft.
Yeah, and it's also about the evolution, you know. Now it's been around for a while. Now the teams have been able to come up with things. And I mean, God knows they've drafted against Azir and Corki for years already. So we're going to see a bit more versatility maybe coming into this week?
Yeah, I mean, I expect now that the teams have had more time to practice on 9-13.
It's good soup.
Thank you. That we do see a little bit more creativity. We already saw picks like the Jizuke Echo, the Caps Talon as well that you mentioned. So I do think that we will start to see more and more of this, try and counteract those boring two champions.
Yeah, well, in terms of upsets in champion pools or champion picks and maybe in games as well, last Saturday was pretty crazy. We'll see what surprises today will bring. Tell me, do you have your eye on a specific matchup that you think will give us an epic upset?
Who we actually really need to call is Laura because she seems to have this all figured out.
Yeah.
I feel like you can
always
look
pick Splice.
Always pick
But
Splice.
that's not an upset anymore.
But I feel like you can hone in on any of these games and you actually have a decent matchup. I think the only one that seems kind of set in stone is G2 versus Excel.
Well, let's take a look in predictions and see if that is reflected there, if anyone went for Excel, because in the race for Superior Analyst, all of us are behind Medic and Law, so they are doing something right. At least we're doing better than StatSpot, not doing too
Vitality?
hot. There we go.
What's going on there for us?
Okay, so I'm down in points. It's about taking the risky gambles, and Vitality are exactly the type of risky gamble that I am willing to take. I'm like, burn it all down as long as Sjokz could go down
You're
with
like
it.
flipping a coin, hoping for 30% to happen over here. I'm like, I don't know about that.
Well, they have been picking it up a little bit,
Sure.
right? But is it enough to take down Sjokz?
Analytically speaking, Jack Troll and Attila are playing much better than they started out with. And every time Attila faces upset, he goes ham. This guy goes absolutely Super Saiyan. So I'm expecting that rivalry to continue.
Yeah, for the rest, we're all in agreeing, of course. And then the fan vote is also just going for what was expected, obviously always Fnatic.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, though. Everyone's still voting Fnatic.
Yeah.
Yes, they did make this roster change, pulling out Reckless, but as you asked earlier, do Fnatic need Reckless to beat Rogue? I don't think the answer is no.
The thing, when I was voting, I was really contemplating
Yes.
it because I thought, Rogue could totally do it. I mean, they're on the upswing. They just beat Origin last week. I feel like we're
They can beat
underselling them.
TSM.
Apparently, we're underselling them maybe a little bit. And at one side, I hope they prove us wrong.
I mean, it's not like it's impossible that Rogue win this game. I just still think the higher percentage chance is that Fnatic wins. So the safe bet
That's why
is
it's an
Fnatic.
upset.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, tomorrow, another really much anticipated match of the week. Splice, they have their eyes set on another top contender.
So now let's go to the Splice questions. Give me just 1 second to watch the game to see where...
I think they lost, but that's just me.
Oh, the game is still going.
Juno jumping in. Xerxes here, Boxer. There's nothing you can do.
Use the stopwatch, but there is no way out.
Knocked him down, but he's going to dash out. Oh, it was so close. Kobe roots him up, and look at Keanu off towards the side.
Splice have beaten Origin. Now they've beaten Fnatic as well. G2 is the last team standing in front of them.
I think G2 is better than Fnatic. I think it's going to be way harder than this week.
So Splice has always been a bit underrated. I always look at them as middle pack, but they always do a bit better than that. But they never challenge for the throne.
For G2, it's easy to look past competition because they've got their eyes set on Worlds, but they cannot lose sight of how important these regular season matches are, of how important it is to lock a first or a second seed as soon as possible.
I mean, I feel pretty confident going up against Splice.
I love that Splice played a controlled game of League of Legends. I love that they get better and better at playing what people would call textbook. I want to see more creativity, and I want to see them fight fire with fire. And I want to see the most explosive early game we've ever seen.
I don't think they're that standard. They're playing Kiana right now, which not many teams play, so I would say they have their niches. They're mostly jungle mid-strength, so I don't want to disrespect them.
When you play against G2, If you go into the game thinking that they are better than you or that they are the scary team, you already lost the game. Even though Jankos and Caps are a really strong duo.
Wait, does he walk into it? Oh my god!
I'm sure that we can handle them.
Yeah, it's up for my mid jungle to not run it down, I guess.
I think this is a chance for Splice to prove themselves that they can go toe-to-toe when it comes to aggressive League of Legends that decides games.
So many doubted them, but Splice proved them amongst the best in the LEC.
I want to play a good matchup against them and just smash them.
The chance to get into Worlds is the most important factor.
I feel pretty confident we can take them.
We are going to take down G2 with our best champions.
Ooh, second place versus third place. Splice versus G2 Esports. I thought G2 was being not too overconfident in most of it, and then in the end, Perks did say we're going to smash him or try to smash him at least, but this should be a much closer matchup than I would have given it in the beginning of the split.
Yeah, I mean, these teams are both looking hot. Splice coming off a 5-game winning streak, G2 just doing G2 things. And I do love that in the interview there, they brought up the jungle matchup, because last time these two teams faced off on opening day, Jankos absolutely murdered Xerxes in the jungle, and if Splice want to pick up that win, they have to turn that matchup around.
I mean, the thing is I can't think of two more opposite teams, and so what's really cool is that draft should decide it from an execution standpoint. I just hope that Splice don't actually go home in a body bag, because G2 destroyed them last time. They need to be able to compete with a very aggressive early game.
Yeah, and in light of the discussion we just had about the picks and the flex picks being nerfed and whatnot, for everybody but G2, we think, because they are able to pull out different things no matter what, just a Talon last week. Frosk, do you think Splice will have any issues with that, or are they better equipped versus a draft of G2?
I mean, theoretically, on opening day, you'd expect that Splice would have all of the preparation and be ready to go, but unfortunately, they didn't have it, so I hope that maybe the time, because you think that if you give Splice preparation, that they will have a cool strategy. Against Fnatic, they brought out the Kiana, but they need something more than that if they want to take on G2.
Yeah, I mean, I loved that Kiana performance from Humanoid last week, so if we can see him on something that's maybe a little bit more explosive, that they can look to play through around in the early game, I think always one of the best answers against G2 is to try and shut down Caps. Now, if you can put the resources in Humanoid to make that a possibility, then you give yourself a much better chance.
Yeah, great match of the week. That is tomorrow, of course, but Splice has another hurdle to jump over today as they go up versus a brand new Misfits, and hopefully for them, they're also not underestimating this roster. As we said already, it is the ERL team from Misfits coming into the LEC, third place over there. What can we expect of their playstyle?
Well, this is 4/5 of that ERL team. The only difference is going to be the jungle position where Kirei will be playing for Misfits, but this team in EU Masters was so focused on the 1-3-1 style. It was a very fresh look for a Misfits team that instead of focusing on a bottom lane, it was all about those solo laners. And while Leader was off making those huge 1v2, 1v3 performances on champions like Aurelia and Akali, it was always Dan, who's the new player here towards the LEC stage, that was looking to settle down with that split push in the side lane.
A couple of questions from me. We saw Leader, of course, here in the LEC. What were our impressions of it, and how do we think that's going to translate now that he has, you know, the players that he's used to playing?
I mean, I feel like it's always going to be a skill check for not just Leader, but also Dan. You can see his champion pool on the screen below you, but it's just this idea of how good are they comparatively to the LEC competition, because we saw Leader basically put together highlight reels, but in the LEC, like you're implying, Sjokz, he just fell flat, and his champion pool seems to be rather limited. If you look at Dan's champion pool, it's not necessarily limited, but it does imply a very specific style, that 1-3-1 or that side lane pressure that Inder is talking about.
Yeah, if you think about two sides of the coin, in terms of confidence, you could go one way, which is like, we'll play out of our minds, we'll, you know, make all the plays and snowball, or you could block. What will it be against a team that is as experienced and as strategized as Splice?
Look, I mean, I think Misfits have nothing to lose coming into this game. It's 5 brand new players, even though you might recognize some of these names. Ultimately, they're going against a team that is much better than them. Splice is top 3 in the LEC at the moment. Misfits Premier is top 3 in the LFL currently. So they come in, even if they die once or twice, I think this is a game where you don't actually have pressure on your shoulders, and that makes it much easier.
Yeah, that is true. Splice, though, they seem to be playing without any pressure whatsoever. 5-game winning streak so far. Just beat Fnatic, which for a lot of people was surprising, and then a lot of people saw it coming. And I know you guys, if you may not have voted for them, but we've been tracking Splice for a while, and they are playing incredibly well. What is so good about their play style?
Oh, look at that that fresh haircut, too, from Xerxes. Playstyle, haircut, he's got it all. Okay. I'm not going to mince words. Yes, Splice play very slow League of Legends. Consecutively for the third split, they are one of the slowest teams in the LEC, but they are so consistent. And you have to think about why they play slow League of Legends, because it's not really about a non-existent early game. It's kind of around the mid game that Splice really gets stalled out. But this is a team that puts themselves on timers. They have such clean fundamentals about when does the power spike come through? Is it on a level? Is it on an item? Is it on when a certain item comes in or how a matchup shifts? They understand the fundamentals so cleanly, and that's what they're constantly playing around.
Yeah, and when you see a Splice game, I actually think it's very easy to pinpoint when there are going to be fights on the map, because this is a team that feels very comfortable fighting around objectives, and they're not usually just going to run into your jungle and try to kill you without something to play over. So when a dragon is spawning or when a baron is spawning, that's when Splice will group up his 5, try to empower Kobbe to win in these team fights.
And you can see that in their stats. They have second highest dragon percentage behind G2. They have the highest baron control percentage. They don't take a lot of Rift Heralds, but their ability to funnel gold through when they're farming their lanes, when they're making lane swaps to go for towers, and just kind of how they set their plays across the map make them very clean. So when they do get leads, they very quickly, like formulaically, push through the map. They take everything simultaneously.
And also when it comes to being behind at 15 minutes, they've won 4 times and lost 2 when they've been behind at 15, because it's not like they're behind miles and miles and miles. They give up very, very little kills. They take very little kills, rather, but they gave up not a lot of deaths in the early game, so they never get so far behind that their strategy can't bring them back.
We like to track gold deficits, whether it's a lead or a deficit, and Splice are the team that sit right in the middle. They don't necessarily climb above their opponents in terms of skyrocketing gold, but they definitely never fall behind. They are just very consistent on a consistent ramp that's just super stable.
And now when we look at them stylistically, if we talk about Splice, 5-game winning streak, they have a plan even if they fall behind. They have that late game insurance no matter what. That makes me think that it will be even harder for Misfits.
I mean,
it's going to say Premier.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard for Misfits, because I think you're going against one of our best junglers in the LEC in Xerxes in the early game. This is a player that will dissect new talent like Misfits. He will be very, very active, especially if he can get his hands on something like an Elise. He's going to smash through the early game.
But I think Xerxes actually thrives when he gets taped to watch a team. So because Misfits are so new, or this iteration of this roster is so new, I actually don't know if Xerxes is going to kind of bring that same mentality or that same ability to dissect this type of opponent.
See, you say that he needs tape to see them or to get a plan going, but this team has also played many games over in the LFL. It's not like Splice can't do prep for this team. Yes, they're going to be playing against weaker opponents over in the regional league, but there's still a lot of tendencies you can try to pull out from their gameplay.
See, I'm on the opposite side. I think that Splice will just fall back to what they know consistently works best for them, and it's probably going to be a 5v5 playmaking-oriented composition, maybe the Azir or the Corki. I'd love to see a Kiana, but otherwise I think it's all going to be about Kobbe's item spikes. Just look at that item thing. As soon as Kobbe has 3 items, that's when Splice will go.
Yeah, and also when you look at picks and bans, of course, I feel like there's a lot of things when you're on the side of Splice that you just take out, and it's not like the Misfits Premier guys are going to come here and say, okay, we've got 10 champions to play in every role, mainly. Kiray's Kindred, that absolutely went off when he played there in the LEC. That can be taken off, or anything. It seems like a pretty easy equation for Splice to make sure that the biggest tools are taken away.
And we've already seen that Misfits have run into champion pool issues with Leader. You know, we heard from the interview that this is the guy who, if he gets the Yasuo, he's going to go like 8-0, or he's going to go 0-8. And it's always going to be that firecracker, if you will, but you know what's coming.
Yeah, all I'm saying is Leader is good. There's a 99.9% chance that he's playing a melee mid laner, rather. That is highly exploitable if you do look to play around the mid lane. We saw that when Humanoid was on Kiana, he looked very, very good. I want to see him on a playmaker that they can look to shut Leader down on and beat him, whether it's mid lane, side lane, around the jungle, anywhere.
Absolutely Splice's game to win. Are we being too hard on this, guys? I think from a side, they've been put in the LEC, so they need to be judged for those qualities. But I'm also looking at them in the light of, okay, what do they show here, and what do we think they can develop into?
I mean, as long as they do better than the previous Misfit squad, I think it's only looking up.
3 wins, that's what we need.
There we go. With that, it is time to get started with today's action, so let's hit the Rift.